He's really better known now as a chronicler of the Dalai Lama's thoughts. And this is the third installment of the Little Book. The Little Book with the Dalai Lama. This one, the first one was the Little Book of Buddhism, then the Little Book of Mysticisms, and now the Little Book of Encouragement. And I can tell you, it's quite a little font of wisdom and the Dalai Lama's teachings, all very nicely packaged, and it gives you a wonderful glimpse into a very uh, a very lively mind. And that's what I wanted to talk to Renuka about. Dr. Singh, I'm going to call you Renuka. I hope
Please,
that's okay.
please, yes.
Yes. So I really wanted to ask you about your association with the Dalai Lama. He is, of course, a very wise man, but
Mm.
he's also a very lively and very young man, isn't he, in his thoughts and in his teaching. So talk a little about your association with him.
Thank you, Kaveree. It's very nice to be with all of you, and thanks for having me. Um, well, if I have to really go back to the beginning,
Yes.
when I met him, uh, that's a long way back when I was a doctoral student myself at JNU, and I
And
was
you were studying Buddhism.
no, I was working on gender issues
Okay.
for my PhD,
Hmm.
and I had a lot of questions about the mind.
Hmm.
And I read a lot of philosophy and psychology, but my questions were not being answered.
Hmm.
Till one day, a friend of mine suggested that, there are some lamas, you should go and see them. Maybe they will be able to answer your questions.
Hmm.
But before that, I must say that I really devoured a lot of literature on mind.
Hmm.
Um,
Was it mostly Western or Indian literature?
Western and Indian as
Hmm.
well.
Hmm.
Uh, but still, those questions remain unanswered.
What were the questions, Renuka?
What were the questions? Well, there were certain mental experiences,
Uh-huh.
but they were very mysterious. They couldn't be
Uh-huh.
explained. They were not there in the literature. So I am told that you really need to meet a teacher in order to understand all that.
Right.
Um, so I was very lucky that I was included as a person to attend His Holiness's teaching that he was giving in his suite at the Ashoka Hotel to young urban professionals. There
Okay.
were about 30 of them, I think.
Right.
This was way back in 1986.
Uh-huh.
Um, and after the first day's teaching, um, I asked His Holiness my question. And I remember there was a senior lady guest sitting over there who said, Your Holiness, but this is not important.
Hmm.
And so His Holiness immediately retorted. He says, No, it's very important.
Hmm.
He took half an hour in answering my question.
May
So
I
I
ask
was
what the
really,
question was again?
well, at that time, I was intrigued by our breathing pattern and its relationship to our consciousness.
Ah, okay.
See, it's usually that we breathe from one nostril at a
Right.
time.
Right.
It's only for a few minutes in every 24 hours that you breathe from both the nostrils
Mm-hmm.
together. And I was
And you
interested,
had noticed this.
yes. And I was always curious that what does it have to do with our consciousness,
Right.
state of mind? And
Right.
that's the question I asked His Holiness. And so he took half an hour in answering, and I was really impressed. I said, wow, here is a person from whom I can learn something.
Right.
Because believe me, I was not a religious person at all. I was from JNU, a very radical place. I was myself a very radical person.
Hmm.
And at home, we were not brought up in a religious way at all. We were brought up with a scientific cast of mind.
Hmm.
Um, so here I land up with a person who's perceived to be a religious person,
Hmm.
but then I found him to be a great scholar.
Hmm.
And I got a personal appointment to see him.
Mm-hmm.
So that was another occasion when I could ask him my other questions.
Hmm.
And at the end of that 40-minute meeting, I can tell you, you will not believe it, but when I stepped out of that room,
Hmm.
there were no questions left. I was in a different state of mind. I was transported to a different level of consciousness.
Right.
So that was the time when I tasted something new in my life.
Right.
And he taught us how to meditate.
Right.
And ever since then, I have meditated.
Mhm.
Um, so that was the beginning. And my relationship with him has deepened over the years. I mean,
Right.
I've done, I think, maybe 7, 8 books with him.
Right.
Yeah. So it goes a long way.
What was it in that 40-minute meeting that so transported you, Renuka?
No, I discussed with him about the masculine and the feminine principle because I was working on women's issues.
Right.
So, from the Tibetan Buddhist point of view, um, I asked him this question that why is method related to the male principle and emptiness with the feminine principle?
Hmm.
Um, and besides that, we discussed about happiness
Mm-hmm.
and reincarnation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think it was just his presence,
Hmm.
which I think it initiates the process within your own self and
Hmm.
your own consciousness.
Hmm.
You see, in Buddhism, they
Hmm.
talk about the inner guru, the outer guru, and the secret guru.
Inner, outer, and secret.
Secret guru,
Okay.
yeah. So I would say that the inner guru relates to the qualities in a person, or you can call it Buddhahood, or
Right.
the Buddha within your own self,
Right.
or all the positive qualities that you want to develop in your own self.
Right.
And the outer guru is the person who, in fact, shows you that or guides you.
Shows you the way.
Yes, shows you the
Hmm.
way. And a secret guru is the method that you adopt
Hmm.
in order to develop those qualities within your own self.
Hmm.
You know, there are different ways of developing,
Hmm.
different paths, you can say.
Hmm.
So that is why you have so many schools, so many teachers, so many masters.
Hmm.
You know, we all follow our own path.
Hmm. And Buddhism allows you that liberty. It doesn't bind you to a particular guru or a particular path.
Um, well, you have to have one major root guru,
Uh-huh.
but you can also learn from other gurus.
Okay.
And yes, there are different ways to nirvana.
Hmm. So, in a way, is it not like Hinduism? Because again, we have such a plethora of gods that we can pray to, and you choose your own path to how you want to live. How does it differ from Hinduism?
No, first of all, you see, in Buddhism, you don't believe in God.
Right.
That's a major
You
difference.
believe in the Buddha.
Um, I don't know if you can say that. You believe in your own self and
Oh,
your own efforts.
okay.
You see, it's your own journey that you have to take responsibility for.
Right.
That's a major difference. And
Right.
then in Buddhism, you don't have the notion of Atma, which you have in Hinduism.
Right. So
Yeah.
you can't say that, it's because God wanted you to suffer, therefore you're suffering.
No, no, you have to take
You
responsibility
have to
for your
take
action.
responsibility.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The ethical discipline is very, very important.
Is that a burden? Because as a Hindu, sometimes it's a relief to think that this was ordained, and if you're suffering, you have no choice. You have to just get through it.
No, I think, you see, if you want to be a happy person and contribute to society
Yeah.
and make a difference in your life,
Yes.
lead a meaningful life, so to say,
Right.
you have to take responsibility for yourself.
Right.
And this is what modernity is all about.
Yeah.
We have choices, we make our own choices.
Mm. You cannot say that this was ordained and therefore you have to live with it.
And that is why you'll find that existentialism too, like Jean-Paul Sartre
Yeah,
says, this is the terrible loneliness that a modern human being feels, because
yeah,
you have to take responsibility for your actions
right,
and bear the consequences.
right. So how do you sort of get through that very solitary, and as you said, it can be very lonely. How do you get through that?
Uh, you see, when you have to do your own practice, yes, it is a lonely experience. Um, you can experience your solitude,
Hmm.
but it is not necessarily negative. That's what I want to say.
Right,
It can be very creative, it can be very productive,
right,
and it can be very positive.
right.
There's a difference between being lonely and being alone.
Alone, of course. And that is that's the difference that you find. So you said that you were not practicing any religion as such. You were
I come from a Sikh family,
right,
but we were not very religious. My parents were very progressive, and they made us go through the religious texts so that we would understand the philosophy and the
right,
essence of what the teachings are,
right,
and live a good life, an
right,
ethical life, which is more important.
right.
But we weren't very ritualistic in any way, or didn't believe at that time. I didn't believe in reincarnation or anything.
Mm.
Can you believe it? But with my practice and with all my studies,
Hmm.
this was a kind of a logical conclusion that I reached
Hmm.
uh, at. And now I can't deny my own human experience
Right.
regarding reincarnation.
So how did it change your life?
How did it change my life?
What
Uh,
were you before, and what did you become after? Or who were you
but,
before, and who have you become after?
no, I was a sociologist
Huh.
then, and now too. I'm a sociologist.
Yeah.
The only thing is your perspective changes.
Right.
In the sense, earlier I would call myself maybe a materialist,
Uh-huh.
where I thought that to change the society, you actually have to change, the material conditions.
Right.
Only then the revolution will come about. Only then society will change.
Right.
But after studying Buddhism and
You were
practicing,
close to communism almost.
Marxist, yes, coming from JNU, it's but natural. uh,
Can't say now these days. We'll talk a little about that also. JNU has changed, hasn't it?
okay.
So,
Uh,
so you were
and
saying that you went from there to
then I discovered that actually the change has to begin from within,
right.
you know. So my whole focus changed.
Hmm.
It was the inner reality which became more important.
Hmm.
So if you want to bring about change outside, first you have to start with your own self.
Hmm.
So this was a major paradigm shift for me.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And when you discussed it with friends, say Hindu friends, how did they differ from this philosophy?
No, I didn't need to discuss with anybody,
Hmm.
to be very frank. I was following my own path. I was very different from my, uh, what should I say, classmates at that time.
Right.
Yeah.
They
So
must have,
I,
because it
I
wasn't
was
very
very,
fashionable then,
no,
right?
no, it wasn't fashionable.
It's
I think,
become fashionable now to a certain extent.
yeah. So, but I followed my path very quietly, I would say.
Hmm.
And it was in the mid 90s that I did this book on gender and spirituality. I studied the urban Indian women,
Hmm.
and I introduced this notion of spirituality into the social sciences.
Hmm.
And I was heavily criticized for that.
Hmm.
because they said, "Oh, why didn't you use the category of religion? Why did you use spirituality?" Whereas, in a very logical way, I try to, explore this theme of spirituality through my case studies, through an empirical work
Hmm.
that I did. And now I find that everyone is using this category.
Right.
So it's a great consolation that I was,
A
maybe
forerunner.
10, 15, yes. Yeah.
What was his case study? Tell us more about it.
The case studies, I'd interviewed about 13 very highly successful Indian women,
Uh-huh.
urban women, um, who had accomplished a lot in their lives,
Right.
and yet they were not feeling empowered.
Mm-hmm.
So you could say, in terms of polity, economy, and society, they were very powerful women.
Right.
Yet there was a certain um, kind of, I should say, a sense of low self esteem,
Mm.
or a lack of confidence, or you could say some kind of emptiness.
Right.
Um, so, which they try to fulfill by following a spiritual path.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And did you find that did you find anything that was in common with them? Was it the kind of spiritual path they chose, or was it
No,
anything?
no, they were all different. They were all following a different path. Yeah.
But this gave them solace.
Yes, I mean, it made them more wholesome.
Right.
Yeah.
And did you
So
see?
inner empowerment, goes hand in hand with outer empowerment.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to say.
And did you see yourself reflected in any of them?
No.
Because you had got onto this path some time ago.
Yeah, but my journey was a bit different, yeah,
Right.
compared to theirs.
You never felt disempowered.
Me?
Yeah.
Um, well, I think we all go through a series of crises in our lives.
Hmm.
So it is also an opportunity, I feel, to explore your interiority.
Hmm.
And that is how we resolve our conflicts and tensions and anxieties. Or
It takes a crisis sometimes to trigger something in you.
yes, so that I think is a must. And also um, encountering, death and the dying experience. That really, I think, awakens people.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, what has your learning been about uh, why we suffer, why we have, why why we die, why we suffer, why people around us give us pain? What are your learnings about that?
Well, suffering is a part of life. I mean, in Buddhism, they say life is suffering,
Right.
but there's a cause of suffering. And if you remove the cause, you can get rid of the suffering. And there is a way to get rid of the suffering, which they say is the Eightfold Path.
Right.
Yeah. Well, suffering is there because nature has made us like that as well. Nature has ordained us to suffer,
Right.
in the sense that we grow old, we fall sick, and we die.
Right.
Um, and then there is this suffering of change,
Yeah.
which you can call mental dissatisfaction.
Right.
Today you buy a house and you're very happy. After 5 years, you're not happy in that same house. You want to change the house. You want to change your car. It's like things change. That's called suffering of change.
Hmm.
We get bored with what we have.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah. Mm. But the deepest level of suffering uh, is the suffering of aggregates. The fact that we have this human body
Right.
and we are part of this cyclic existence.
Right.
So, this is, when we get attached to our experiences. So, that is the root cause of our suffering.
Right. So therefore, you have to practice detachment.
Yes, you need a little bit of renunciation in your life. You need a little bit of, this distance. Like in many other philosophies, they say you need to be a witness.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Why do you think Buddhism has become so popular, especially in some parts of the West? What draws people to it, you think?
In this age of reason,
Mm,
uh, first of all, I think people find it a very, very kind of a rational approach
mm,
to oneself and to the world and to one's mind. And secondly, uh, this is a very egalitarian philosophy.
right.
So you don't find, I mean, I think
There's no caste or
discrimination,
class here.
class, and there is this universal category of Buddhahood, which everyone, is endowed with.
Right,
So there is a certain egalitarianism, I
right.
think.
So liberating, no?
It's a very liberating. And finally, I would say that it brings the best out of you
Mm,
as a human being. Your humaneness uh, gets tapped when you develop compassion within your own self, towards your own self and towards others.
mm,
So that is the most challenging task. You can be compassionate sometimes uh, to the others and not your own self.
right.
And sometimes you're compassionate towards your own self and not others. So if you can do both these sides, yeah, I think that's quite a lot of achievement.
What does Buddhism say about good and evil? Uh, does it say that there are some people who do not deserve compassion, or
No, for according to Buddhism, everybody deserves compassion.
no matter how good, or does it have a concept of evil?
Well, evil, I would say, in terms of negative emotions,
Yeah.
you could see that you could call it evil, yeah.
Mm,
But not evil like in the West.
right.
Yeah.
But what do you do when you encounter it? Do you forgive? Say,
Then no,
so if it's embodied in a person, do you forgive that person?
you have to understand the person, why the person has done what the person has done,
Right.
and forgive them. So forbearance, forgiveness is very important in Buddhism,
Right.
but not forgetting.
Right.
Yeah.
Why?
Remembrance and
Why?
awareness is very important
Why is that important? Why is not
because
forgetting?
everything in Buddhism boils down to awareness.
Okay. You have to pay attention to what you're
Yes,
doing.
yes.
Yeah. And I think the problem is that sometimes we're little careless about the way we live, isn't it?
Yes, I think people are leading very sleepy lives.
Right.
You have to, shake them up.
There's a lovely line, in the new film. I don't know if you've seen The White Tiger,
I
where
haven't seen that yet. No.
there's precisely this line which says that all of you are sleeping, but I, like the Buddha, have just woken up, have awakened. So he
Okay,
said,
okay.
while all of you are sleeping,
Mm-hmm.
I, like the Buddha, have just awakened, and therefore, he sort of moves from being a driver to an entrepreneur, very successful entrepreneur, and he takes charge of his life.
Okay.
So I found that quite interesting. That you have to pay attention. You have to know what you're doing. You have to be aware of it.
You see, the tragedy of our times is that we lose our attention um, in what should I say? Uh, there is this bombardment of images,
Right.
glamour, and
Words,
words.
noise.
Yeah. Uh, so we get consumed by all these things.
Hmm.
So, or in terms of our ambition,
Hmm.
lust, and greed.
Hmm.
So we are paying attention to all those things,
Hmm.
and we forget completely about our own inner attention.
Hmm.
So you actually have to, redeem it.
Hmm.
Come back to the original attention that is there inside your mind.
Hmm.
So there's a certain purification of the mind which is required.
Hmm. And you need to do this constantly through
Yes,
meditation. That's the
yes. It has to be a daily practice.
right. You
Yeah.
cannot do it for 2 months and then say, okay, let's take a break, come
Mhm.
back to it later.
Yeah.
So it's a very it's a very demanding discipline.
You see, you have to put in daily effort
Right.
for your development.
Hmm.
That's how I'll put it. Usually, when people ask His Holiness, "So, Your Holiness, we've been meditating for so long and practicing, and we don't see any results." So, His Holiness says it's not for one day, it's not for 1 month, not for 1 year, not for one life, it's for eons.
Hmm.
Then the change occurs.
Hmm.
So, you need a lot of patience.
Is that why reincarnation is so important then?
Uh, well, reincarnation is there whether we think
Like
it is important or not. It
it
is going.
exists.
It's a scientific fact.
Right.
So the main thing is what is it that we do with our own lives?
Right.
Yeah.
And what did the practice of meditation teach you, Renuka?
Practice of meditation
That
helps
awareness of
you that
your breath, awareness of
it
your
helps
breath,
you to concentrate.
right?
Yeah. So actually, there are two main kinds of meditations. One is the concentration meditation,
Mm-hmm.
and the other is a contemplative meditation, where you actually analyze
Okay.
your reality, or you take up certain themes like suffering or death and dying, or impermanence or emptiness, and you actually contemplate on those themes
Right.
and
And,
try and realize emptiness in
right.
your meditation session. Or
And
for example, if you want to have a your own death and dying experience, you can visualize that and go through it.
right. That
So
makes
that is called analytical meditation.
that rids you of your fear. If you can visualize it,
Yeah, I mean, slowly, I hope.
yeah.
Yeah. You
Is
can get rid of your anger, anxiety, depression,
fear
fear, jealousy, all the negative emotions.
right?
So it's a purification process, as I was saying.
What is the difference between contemplative meditation and concentration meditation?
In the concentration meditation, you have an object of meditation. It
Right.
could be inner or outer, and you focus on that object. For
Right.
example, it could be your breathing,
Right.
or it could be an object outside, external or internal. So
So
this helps you
mhm,
to, in fact, work on your attentiveness.
right. So the Dalai Lama uh, usually argues for the contemplated meditation.
Both, both, both.
So he asks you to choose, or you
No,
know,
no, you have to do both. Yeah.
you have to do both.
Mm.
So over the years, how have you seen him? I mean, he seems changeless and ageless because I mean, for the longest time, he has the same twinkle in his eye, he has the same way of talking, and he has the same way of being
It's as if,
entertaining at times and yet so wise.
yeah, yeah. It's as if he laughs from his toes, to his head. No, the
That's
laugh.
very well said.
Yeah. Um, Wes, I think there is a certain freshness in His Holiness that you feel
Hmm.
that has been there, and
Hmm.
that is that element of agelessness.
Hmm.
I think it's because of his spiritual practice.
Hmm.
Very, very clear to us, and he is an enlightened being.
Right.
Yeah.
So, of course, that's what makes him so attractive to the whole world, and everybody seeks him out.
Hmm.
Uh, and that sense of that sort of inner radiance which he seems to, but it's a radiance that envelopes people, that embraces people. It's not just restricted to himself.
Yeah.
That is what is so unusual about someone like him. Have you seen it in anyone else?
Anyone else?
Yeah, have you seen this kind of radiance, this kind of lightness of being almost?
Yes, some of the masters have it. Yeah.
Hmm.
Mm. But he is very special.
Right.
Mm. But I think what I like about His Holiness is that he's a very realistic person,
Right.
very down to earth.
Can you
And,
give us some examples? Some things he may have said to you, or
well, no, he will notice, very minute things as well.
uh-huh.
You don't expect a master like him to have so much of, paying so much attention to detail. But I mean, he's a very sharp person. So I don't know. I can't think of, or maybe I don't want to share.
Yeah, I suppose
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
Would you
There's
like,
sometimes these things are very personal, I
pause?
think. Yeah.
Would you like to read
So,
some of the quotes from the Little Book of Encouragement? And would you like to talk about why you went from Buddhism to, no, Buddhism to mysticism to encouragement? Those are the three books you've done, right? The small ones.
yeah, but basically, I think it deals with the same subject,
Right.
which is about, your own enlightenment.
Hmm.
Yeah.
What was the reaction to these books from people? Do they find it easy to devour, easy to consume?
I think so. That's why they have been so popular.
Hmm.
They have been translated in so many languages, and they have been on the bestsellers list in the US and UK and Europe. I mean, everywhere.
Hmm.
Uh, I think people um, who, in fact, especially the younger generation,
Hmm.
they're so hard pressed for time.
Hmm.
So these little books, they're
Hmm.
very useful. They can carry with them, put them in their pockets or bags, and read them in the trains when they're traveling, flying, or whatever. So it's it's a good thing to encapsulate His Holiness's wisdom in this form, I think.
I wonder how you choose because he's spoken so much and he's.
But my dear, it took me so long. I have to go through all his lectures and teachings, and then mm, go over it again and again. And I keep marking, and then I keep selecting and sifting. It takes a very long time. It's not easy.
I
And
can imagine how many words must it be that you read for you to,
yeah.
choose.
And
Uh,
then finally, it's like a distillation process.
yes.
Yeah. So then ultimately, the pearls come out, so
Uh,
to
I,
speak.
I love the description of the title of the book, The Little Book of Encouragement. Do you want to talk about this whole idea of encouragement? It's such a lovely term.
Well, actually, when we had the lockdown,
Uh-huh.
so people were feeling very lonely, uncertain,
Mm,
depressed, uh, anxious, and fearful.
mm,
Uh, that's when my editor suggested that I should come up with another book,
mm.
because earlier also I've done these quotations books by His Holiness. I've done this 365 quotations, the daily inspiration book.
Mm.
Uh, So even His Holiness's office felt, actually, I was working on another book by
Hmm.
His Holiness.
Okay,
These
what
were
was that?
teachings. These were teachings given by His Holiness that I'd organized in Delhi.
Okay,
I was trying to put that together and edit the teachings. But then lockdown happened and the pandemic.
yeah.
So we thought this will be more useful and beneficial for the people.
Hmm.
So I should stop working on the other one and focus on this first. So
And
that is how
okay,
for I worked on it for about 5 months,
okay.
and this lockdown baby came out.
Has
Uh,
His Holiness seen it?
yes, he has seen it.
Okay,
And
what
in
did he have?
fact, I was very happy that I received a letter from His Holiness.
Okay.
He was thanking me for it, and he's done a forward for the book too. Yeah, and he says if you find anything useful, practice it.
Right.
Otherwise, forget about it. Yeah.
So, and when you look back on your journey, you see yourself as uh, a spiritual sociologist, a spiritual feminist. How would you describe yourself? Or a
Well,
feminist?
I would say that these labels actually, Kaveri, they don't really matter.
Matter.
No, it's your inner experience which enriches you.
Yeah.
So I think as a sociologist, I have really been empowered and enriched by my inner experiences.
Right.
So these are labels that are given to us in our empirical world.
Right.
That is how people perceive us.
And people
But
love
I
to
just,
perceive
yeah,
you.
but I just see myself as an ordinary human being
Right.
who is on a certain path, and I'm trying my best to explore both the worlds, inner and outer,
Mm.
myself.
Mm. Can we talk a little about how the environment around us seems to have changed so much? It seems to be quite the opposite of what these teachings are, which is about
Yeah, as we know that the entire world seems to be tangled in violence and disease
yes,
today, and it really needs to be straightened out.
yeah,
So, you look at the environmental crisis, the economic crisis, the political crisis, the institutional crisis,
yes.
you name it, everywhere. It's the same story. And there is this ethical disarray um, all around us. Um, so this modern malaise has, I feel, produced a very depressing scenario.
Yeah. And I wonder,
And this is also a consumeristic, era, I would say. The commodities have triumphed.
they own us, we don't own them any longer.
And then all around, you just have a very pragmatic approach which reduces everything to quantity.
Yeah,
And it has eviscerated our identity.
yeah.
So when we are living in these materialistic times, you really need to awaken the people.
Mm.
That is why we need to recruit, spiritual consciousness, because it denounces the fetishism of the market and technology and legitimizes subjective freedom.
But do we have such a leader? I mean, we have the Dalai Lama, we
Yes.
do.
The
But
Dalai Lama is an example for us, you see.
yeah,
We have to be our own leaders. We have to look after our own selves.
right. Why
That's
should
the whole thing, others can't do it for us. We have to take responsibility for our own selves.
right? We can't say, oh, this is the government's work or this is X
No,
work or Y's work.
no, no. First, we do our bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Would you like to read a couple of quotes from the book so that
Oh,
readers can get, viewers can get a sense of how good it is to read this?
okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that His Holiness has four major commitments in his life.
Mhm.
Um, the first one is he is trying to appeal to the universal humanity,
Right,
yeah, and he wants to promote happiness for all human beings all over the world. For
right,
him, the 7 billion people
right.
are the same.
Yep.
That is what he means by equality. And then he believes in the interfaith, interreligious dialogue
Mm,
so that you can bring about greater mutual understanding
mm,
in the world and encourage harmony. And thirdly, his commitment is to preserve the culture and environment of Tibet,
right.
where you can also say that it's not only about the Tibetan environment, he's worried about the whole planet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Recently, his other book came out. And finally, he wants to promote the ancient Indian wisdom and
Mm,
knowledge about the mind. And he wants to bring in the Nalanda tradition
mm,
into the modern education
mm.
because he feels that the modern education needs to pay attention to the understanding of inner reality and the mind.
What is the Nalanda tradition? Sorry. I know, of course, the Nalanda University, but what did it?
Well, these are the masters who have studied, uh, in a very dialectical way,
Uh-huh.
uh, the reality of the inner world, of the
Okay.
mind. They've tried
Right,
to understand. Yeah.
right,
So it's a very rational approach where
okay,
they question a lot.
right,
They don't take, anything
anything.
for granted. No.
Right.
Yeah. So transcending dichotomies and the preeminence and the immanence of transcendence is what His Holiness is all about, I
Right.
would say.
Right.
Okay, so I'll go through some of the quotes now.
Yes, please.
Mhm. Scientists have evidence to prove that basic human nature is compassionate. They have also found the opposite, that constant anger and hatred weaken our immune system.
Mm,
Therefore, just as we teach people physical hygiene to help preserve their physical health, for a happy and peaceful mind, we need to teach people about emotional hygiene, how to tackle their destructive emotions. So, there are some personal experiences of his too that I have included in this.
mm,
There are worse places to endure a lockdown than a palace.
mm,
My home, with its sweeping views of icy mountain peaks, has fresh water and pure air. I stay here peacefully, but my thoughts are with all those who are suffering and are afraid during this terrible pandemic. However, there has been much to inspire and celebrate. Many people have not cared about their safety and are helping others. It is wonderful. The next one is material values do matter, but deeper inner values are more important than them.
mm,
During the last century, we have made great material progress, but it is precisely this material progress that is now leading to our destruction. Material progress alone cannot reduce our psychological stress, anxiety, anger, and frustration. Scientists who once paid attention to material things are now focusing on training the mind.
mm,
Another one, you must have the determination to achieve enlightenment and serve all sentient beings. We call this bodhicitta.
mhm,
It is also known as infinite altruism. To develop this determination, first we must study the Four Noble Truths. To end suffering, first you have to know what is suffering, what is its cause, then the cessation, and finally the path, the true path. Until the 20th century, not much attention was paid to the mind, to our mental consciousness. But towards the end of the 20th century, it began to be acknowledged that there was something else that affected our brain. Meditation and breathing exercises impacted our mental consciousness. These things can help us focus on the mind itself for a few seconds to begin with, and then for a few minutes. I have some friends who can focus for several hours. Combining analysis with meditation enables us to achieve insight.
This is what you talked about, contemplative
Yeah.
meditation.
Mhm. Then let me say something about the environment. His Holiness is very, very concerned about
Yeah,
that.
he's very good.
Our environmental recklessness has brought the planet to a stage where she can no longer accept our behavior in silence. The sheer size and frequency of environmental disasters, hurricanes, wildfires, desertification, glacial retreat, and melting of the polar ice caps can be seen as a response to our irresponsible behavior. So he says that I came to Dharamsala in 1960. That winter, we had a lot of snow. Later, with each passing year, the snow got less and less. We must take global warming very seriously now. I urge the world to invest more in wind and solar energy and to move away from the dependence on fossil fuels. Another concern of His Holiness's, I quote, globally and within individual nations, there is a huge gap between the rich and the poor. Pay more attention to the poor and try to reduce this gap. The other day, I publicly expressed the dire situation of refugees in Africa and Latin America, who continue facing difficulties in their daily lives. The rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer is a very serious matter. It goes totally against our sense of compassion.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Renuka. I think it was very enlightening for sure. And I think through your journey, we also get a sense of, where we ourselves can stop and think and, start practicing some of what you have said as well. And do you believe for that you do need a guru, or is it something that you can do on your own?
You see, intellectually, you can do it on your own,
Yes.
I would say, but
Through your own
experientially, you need a teacher.
You do. You do
I,
need, because you have some questions that cannot be answered by.
yeah, because it's the other person is at a higher level of experience of it. So they can guide us.
Right.
The gurus outside us. That is why we need them.
Thank you.
Otherwise, it's a very inflated ego that I am independent. No, we are interdependent.
Yeah. And I know it all, and I can do it all.
Yeah. We always need others.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for talking to us. I think this is the kind of thing that we all need during this very dark time. And I would advise everyone to go and buy it. It's a little book, but it's a really lovely little book, and it's worth reading. Thank you so much, Dr. Renuka Singh, for speaking to us.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I hope people will develop some calmness and contentment in their life.
And compassion and empathy.
And compassion, of course, yes. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Pawan.
Okay, thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Absolutely, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Singh, today. Thank you, Kaveree ma'am, as usual. And guys, we'll be putting this on our YouTube channel by tomorrow morning as well on Tiffin Talks. Do subscribe and follow us on our Insta and Facebook, and we'll keep bringing you these amazing discussions during these tough times. Thank you so much. Have a great evening ahead. Thank you. Cheers.
Okay. Thank you.